The sun dipped low behind the horizon, casting long shadows across the empty streets of Ridgefield. The small town, once filled with the hum of daily life, now lay eerily silent. Windows were boarded up, and cars stood abandoned, their owners nowhere in sight. A heavy silence had settled over America, a silence that felt more threatening than the chaos that had preceded it. Claire Jensen stood by the cracked window of the town's old diner, her eyes scanning the fading light outside. As a former military officer, she had been preparing for this moment long before the silence fell. Her hands rested tightly on the worn rifle slung across her back, muscles tense as every instinct screamed that danger lurked beyond the shadows. No radio signals had come through for days. No emergency broadcasts, no calls for help, not even the static hum of a distant transmission. The silence was absolute, oppressive. And it was growing. In the diner's small gathering room, a handful of survivors huddled together, exchanging whispered theories. Most were too afraid to speak openly, but their eyes betrayed the same fear Claire felt deep inside. "We can't stay here forever," she said, breaking the uneasy quiet. "Supplies are running low. If we don't get food and medical kits soon, we won't last the week." Tom, the town's mechanic, nodded grimly. "We can take my truck. It's still got fuel, and the roads are clear. But we need to be fast." Claire gathered a small team: Tom, Sarah, a young medic, and Marcus, a former teacher with a knack for calm under pressure. Together, they prepared for the unknown, loading weapons, bandages, and ration packs into the battered truck. As darkness fully settled, they slipped out into the night, the air thick with tension. The streets were deathly quiet except for the soft crunch of their boots and the faint hum of the engine. Outside Ridgefield's limits, the landscape shifted from familiar to ominous. Trees bent under the weight of heavy fog rolling in like a living thing. The group's headlights cut through the mist, revealing twisted signs of chaos, overturned cars, hastily abandoned belongings, and scrawled warnings on walls. "Keep your eyes open," Claire whispered. "Whatever's out there, it's waiting." Suddenly, a distant noise shattered the quiet, a soft, guttural sound, like a growl mixed with a whisper. The team froze, weapons raised. "It's them," Sarah said, her voice barely audible. "Silent ones," Marcus added, echoing rumors that had begun to spread. "They don't make the loud noises we're used to. They move quietly, hunting in the shadows." Claire's heart pounded. She forced herself to stay calm. "Stay close. Don't make a sound." The truck rolled forward slowly, every moment stretching into an eternity. Shapes shifted just beyond the edges of the headlights, glimpses of gaunt figures with pale skin and hollow eyes. They moved methodically, stalking the empty roads with an unnatural patience. Suddenly, from the fog ahead, something dashed across the road, fast, silent, and unnerving. The team instinctively raised their weapons, but the figure disappeared into the mist before they could react. "Did you see that?" Tom asked, voice tight. Claire nodded, swallowing her fear. "We need to keep moving." As they neared an abandoned gas station, a flicker of movement caught Claire's eye. She signaled for the truck to stop. Stepping out cautiously, she scanned the area. In the shadows, a young girl huddled behind a rusted barrel, eyes wide with terror. She was alive, a rare sight in a world where death walked silently. "Come here," Claire called softly, kneeling a few feet away. The girl hesitated, then slowly emerged, clutching a worn teddy bear. "What's your name?" Claire asked gently. "Emily," the girl whispered. I was hiding." "We're going back to Ridgefield," Claire said. "You're safe with us." As Emily climbed into the truck, the team felt a brief moment of hope. But the silence pressed in around them, a reminder that the danger was far from over. Driving back toward town, Claire couldn't shake the feeling that something watched them from the shadows, waiting, patient, silent. The night was far from quiet, and the silence of dead America was only the beginning. "Would you like me to continue with part 2? The fog clung to the ground like a thick, gray blanket, swallowing the world beyond the cracked highway. Claire's truck crawled cautiously through the mist, headlights piercing feebly into the unknown. The heavy silence that had gripped America since the fall seemed to grow heavier here, pressing down on the survivors like an invisible weight. Emily sat between Sarah and Marcus, clutching her teddy bear with trembling hands. Her wide eyes darted nervously at every shadow and movement beyond the fog's reach. Claire glanced in the rearview mirror. The girl's pale face reflected the fear they all shared, but also something else, a flicker of determination, buried deep beneath the terror. "Are we going the right way?" Sarah asked quietly, breaking the tense stillness. Claire nodded. "Tom's been here before. He remembers a small supply depot about 10 miles ahead. If it's still intact, we might find food, water, maybe even medicine." The group held their breath with every mile, knowing each moment outside the safety of Ridgefield was a gamble. Every noise could be a trap, every shadow a threat. As they rounded a bend, a figure appeared in the distance, a man, standing motionless by the roadside, his silhouette barely visible in the fog. Claire tensed, signaling Tom to slow down. "Stop," she whispered. "Stay alert." The truck rolled to a halt a few feet away. Claire reached for her rifle, gripping it tightly as she opened the door. The man turned slowly, revealing a gaunt face, sunken eyes, and a beard flecked with gray. His clothes were torn and stained, but his eyes held a sharpness that told Claire he was no stranger to danger. "Help," he croaked, voice hoarse. "Please, help." Claire motioned for the others to stay back as she approached. "Who are you? What happened out here?" The man swallowed hard, glancing nervously into the fog. "Name's Jack. I was with a group from the north. We were trying to reach the safe zone, but the Silent Ones, they found us." "Silent Ones?" Marcus repeated, his voice edged with unease. Jack nodded grimly. "They're not like the others. They don't groan or scream. They move quietly, like shadows. They hunt in packs, using the fog to their advantage. If you make a sound, they come for you." Claire's grip tightened on her rifle. "How many are there?" "Too many," Jack said. "They spread faster than we thought. And they're learning, adapting." Sarah stepped forward, her voice gentle. "Where's your group now?" Jack's eyes darkened. "Most didn't make it. I was separated during the attack. I've been alone for days." Claire glanced back at the truck. Emily's fingers clenched the teddy bear tighter, her small frame trembling. They couldn't take this man with them, not without knowing if he was infected. But leaving him meant condemning him. "We'll take you back to Ridgefield," Claire said firmly. "There's safety there, for now." Jack nodded, relief washing over his face. "Thank you." As they loaded Jack into the truck, Claire noticed his hand twitch involuntarily. A subtle, almost imperceptible movement. She forced the thought aside. There was no time for doubt, not yet. The drive back was tense, every shadow and sound amplified by fear. Jack told them more about the Silent Ones, how they had evolved, learned to avoid noise, how their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, making them impossible to miss once spotted, but easy to miss if they stayed still. Suddenly, a low rustling sound came from the woods beside the road. Claire slammed on the brakes. The truck lurched to a stop. "Did you hear that?" Tom whispered. The group froze, listening. The rustling grew closer, accompanied by a faint whispering sound, almost like voices carried on the wind, but distorted and broken. Claire raised her rifle, eyes scanning the fog. Out of the mist stepped a small group of figures, gaunt, pale, their eyes gleaming with an unnatural light. But they didn't move aggressively. Instead, they paused, watching the truck, their heads tilting slightly as if curious. "They're not attacking," Marcus murmured, voice shaky. "Why aren't they attacking?" Jack's face went pale. "They're testing you. Waiting for a sound." Claire's heart pounded. "Stay perfectly still. Don't make a sound." Time seemed to freeze as the Silent Ones regarded the group silently. Emily squeezed Sarah's hand, eyes wide. After a tense moment, the figures turned slowly and melted back into the fog, disappearing like ghosts. Claire exhaled slowly. "Let's move." Now. They sped away, hearts pounding, minds racing. The silent ones were no longer just creatures of horror, they were intelligent hunters, silent stalkers in the mist. Back in Ridgefield, the fog had begun to seep into the streets, curling around the boarded windows like creeping fingers. The town felt smaller, more fragile. Claire gathered the group in the diner's back room. Jack sat silently, watching the fire flicker. "We need a plan," Claire said. "These creatures aren't mindless. They're organized. And the fog is their ally." Tom nodded grimly. "We can't wait for them to come to us." Sarah added, "Maybe it's time we stopped running and started fighting." Marcus looked at Claire. "Are we ready for that?" Claire met his gaze, steel in her eyes. "We have to be. Because out there, in the silence and the fog, the real fight is just beginning." Emily's small voice broke the heavy mood. "Will we be safe?" Claire crouched down beside her. "We'll do everything we can." Outside, the wind whispered through the empty streets, carrying the promise of danger, and the hope that only the brave could hold on to. "Would you like me to proceed with part 3 next?" The dawn was weak and gray when the survivors returned to Ridgefield. The fog still lingered, wrapping the town in a damp chill that seeped into every corner. The brief respite of night's darkness had given way to a cold, unsettling morning, one that offered little comfort to those who knew the horrors lurking just beyond. Claire stood outside the diner, looking toward the quiet streets. The return journey had been tense but uneventful. Still, the unease settled heavy in her chest. Jack had proven himself useful, sharing critical information about the Silent Ones, but the truth was growing clearer: this was no ordinary zombie outbreak. Something darker, more cunning, was at work. Inside the diner, the rest of the town's survivors gathered in the small community hall. Faces were drawn and eyes weary. Food supplies were critically low, and morale even lower. Fear had begun to breed suspicion. Whispers circled, doubts about who could be trusted, fears of infection, and rumors of betrayal. Claire stepped to the front, her voice steady but urgent. "We can't survive by hiding forever. The Silent Ones are hunting smarter. We have to prepare and adapt, together." A few nodded, but others exchanged doubtful glances. Tom spoke up from the back. "We don't even know what we're dealing with. If these things are smart, how do we fight them?" Marcus added quietly, "And if they're watching us, what if they're already inside Ridgefield?" The room grew colder. The idea was horrifying, that the enemy wasn't just outside but possibly among them. Claire knew she had to act fast. She formed small teams to guard key points around the town and sent a few scouts out to keep watch on the outskirts. Sarah tended to the wounded and rationed supplies with grim efficiency. That afternoon, Claire, Jack, Tom, and Marcus made plans for their next supply run, this time targeting a nearby medical center that might still have usable equipment. As they prepared, Emily watched silently from the corner. Despite her youth, she had already witnessed more than any child should. "Emily, you should rest," Sarah said kindly. Emily shook her head. "I want to help." Claire caught the girl's determined gaze and nodded. "You're brave. But this next trip will be dangerous." "We'll keep you safe," Sarah promised. With that fragile hope, the group set out once more, moving cautiously through the misty streets. As they approached the medical center, a sense of unease tightened like a noose around Claire's chest. The building stood partially intact but eerily silent. Windows were broken, and doors hung loosely on their hinges. Inside, the faint smell of antiseptic mingled with decay. The group moved carefully, scanning for threats. Suddenly, a faint clicking noise echoed from the hallway ahead. Claire froze, signaling the others to stop. From the shadows stepped a figure, or what looked like one. Its skin was mottled and pale, eyes sunken deep. But unlike the Silent Ones they had faced before, this creature moved with eerie precision. It didn't groan or stagger, it moved silently, with deliberate purpose. Its head turned slowly to regard them, the faint glow in its eyes more intense than anything before. Claire raised her rifle but hesitated. This wasn't the mindless monster they had expected. The creature lunged with unnatural speed. Claire fired, the bullet striking its chest. It stumbled but didn't fall. The group scattered, dodging as the creature advanced relentlessly. "This isn't like the others," Marcus shouted. "It's hunting." Claire fired again, and this time the creature collapsed, but the moment of triumph was hollow. "We have to get out," Claire said, breath ragged. As they fled, Claire realized the truth: the Silent Ones were evolving, becoming hunters. They were learning to stalk silently, to ambush with calculated strikes. The threat was no longer just a mindless horde but a predator. Back at Ridgefield, the mood darkened. Rumors spread that some survivors might already be infected, and paranoia grew thick. Claire stood in the center of the town square, facing the gathered survivors. "We can't afford fear to tear us apart. We must trust each other, or we will fall." A murmur rippled through the crowd, but trust was fragile, and the silence outside seemed to grow louder. That night, Claire kept watch on the rooftop of the diner. The fog swirled below like a living thing, hiding unseen horrors. She tightened her grip on her rifle, eyes never resting. Somewhere out there, the Silent Ones waited, watching, learning, and preparing to strike again. Would you like me to continue with Part 4? Nightfall wrapped Ridgefield in darkness, broken only by the weak glow of firelight and the flickering street lamps struggling to stay alive. The fog had thickened, seeping into every crack, every alleyway, swallowing the edges of the town in a ghostly veil. Claire stood atop the diner's roof, scanning the shadows with a rifle cradled tightly in her arms. Below, the survivors huddled inside the diner and the community hall, windows barricaded, nerves fraying with each passing hour. The events of the day weighed heavily on everyone's minds. The new breed of Silent Ones, the hunters, had shattered the fragile sense of security they had clung to for so long. Claire's breath came out in cold puffs as she adjusted her grip and peered through the darkness. Somewhere in the fog, the creatures were moving, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She could almost hear their breath, the soft whisper of footsteps, as if the mist itself carried their presence. Suddenly, a sharp noise shattered the silence, a distant crash, like a door or window breaking. "Get ready!" Claire shouted down to the group gathered below. Tom and Marcus grabbed their weapons, while Sarah ushered children and the elderly to safety deeper inside the diner. The minutes stretched out agonizingly. Every shadow could hide a threat, every sound might be the first step of an attack. Then, from the fog, shapes emerged, figures moving silently, gliding toward the town's edge with unnatural precision. The Silent Ones were here. Claire fired first, the rifle's report echoing through the night. Bullets struck flesh, but the creatures didn't slow. They pushed forward relentlessly, hunting in coordinated waves, striking from the fog and vanishing just as quickly. Ridgefield became a battlefield. Inside the diner, screams and shouts mixed with the sounds of gunfire. Survivors scrambled to defend their home, barricading doors, shooting through windows, trying to hold the creatures back. Claire fought alongside Tom and Marcus, their movements fluid despite exhaustion. Every kill was met with the realization that more would come. The fog thickened, swallowing some of the creatures from sight, only for them to reappear from unexpected angles. At one point, Emily's terrified cry rang out. Claire turned to see the girl cornered near a shattered window, a Silent One advancing silently toward her. Without thinking, Claire dove between them, driving her rifles but into the creature's skull. It crumpled, but the moment was brief, more were closing in. Sarah grabbed Emily's hand, pulling her to safety as Claire covered their retreat. The survivors regrouped in the diner's kitchen, hearts pounding, breaths ragged. The fight had lasted minutes but felt like hours. "We can't keep this up," Claire said between breaths. "They'll break through if we don't find a way to stop them." Tom nodded grimly. "They're testing us, learning our patterns." Marcus added, "We need traps, barricades, something to slow them down." Jack, who had been silent until now, stepped forward. "There's an old factory on the outskirts, full of old machinery and scrap. We could set traps there, force them into a kill zone." Claire considered the plan. It was risky, but they needed every advantage. Tonight we rest, she said. At first light, we head to the factory and prepare. We fight smarter, or we die. As the survivors settled into uneasy silence, Claire took a moment to look around at the faces of those she was fighting to protect. Fear, exhaustion, and hope mingled in their eyes. Outside, the fog swirled, hiding the silent ones as they retreated into the shadows, waiting, watching, ready to strike again. Claire's hand tightened on her rifle. The war for Ridgefield was far from over. Would you like me to prepare Part 5 next? Morning broke over Ridgefield with a pale, weak light struggling through the dense fog. The battle from the previous night still echoed in the survivors' minds. The relentless attack by the Silent Ones had left them shaken, but not defeated. Claire knew this fight was far from over. If anything, it had only just begun. The plan was clear: they would move to the old factory on the town's outskirts. It was a derelict place, rusty machinery, broken walls, and piles of scrap metal. But Claire hoped it could become a death trap for the creatures that had pushed so close to their homes. She gathered the team: Tom, Marcus, Jack, Sarah, and a few others willing to take the risk. Emily stayed behind with the others, guarded by Sarah, her small hands tightly gripping the teddy bear. The journey through the fog was tense and quiet. Every sound seemed magnified, every shadow a potential threat. Claire led, rifle raised, eyes scanning constantly. When they arrived at the factory, the place was even more eerie than they remembered. Rusted gears hung frozen, broken windows gaped like open wounds, and the silence was almost suffocating. "All right," Claire said, her voice low but firm. "We set traps here, chains, wires, anything that can slow them down. Then we'll lure the Silent Ones inside." Jack nodded. "If they come through the main gate, they'll get caught in the snare. We'll have the advantage." Tom set to work, dragging scrap metal to block entry points and rigging makeshift alarms, tin cans tied to wires, anything that would give them early warning. Hours passed, and the group worked methodically. Marcus found old gas canisters, and Claire suggested creating barricades reinforced with flammable materials. If the creatures got too close, a burst of fire might buy precious seconds. As the last trap was set, the group settled in, waiting for the inevitable. The fog grew thicker, curling around the factory like a living thing. Then, from the mist, came the faintest sound, the soft, near-silent approach of the Silent Ones. Claire's heart hammered. "Get ready." The first wave came silently, shadows slipping through the fog and into the factory's ruined walls. As they crossed the threshold, chains rattled and tin cans clanged, sending shouts from the survivors. Fire roared to life as Marcus ignited the barricades. Flames licked the cold air, casting long shadows and forcing the creatures to retreat momentarily. But the Silent Ones adapted quickly, pressing forward with terrifying coordination. Claire fired steadily, each shot echoing sharply. Tom and Jack covered the flanks, pushing back the advancing enemies. Suddenly, a figure appeared from the fog, faster and more intelligent than the others. It moved like a hunter, eyes glowing bright with cruel intent. "Look out!" Claire shouted, firing as it lunged toward her. The creature dodged, moving too fast for her to track. It slashed with a sharp claw, cutting Claire's arm. Pain flared, but she gritted her teeth and fired again, this time hitting it in the chest. The creature stumbled, snarling, before collapsing into the flames. The battle raged on, fierce and relentless. Hours later, as the first light of dawn began to break, the survivors stood bloodied but alive. Many creatures lay dead, caught in the traps or burned by the fire. But Claire knew this victory was temporary. "We held them off," Tom said, breathing hard. "But they'll come back." Jack wiped sweat and grime from his brow. "They're learning. This was only a test." Claire looked at the weary faces of her team. "We need to keep fighting smarter. We need to find a way to end this." Suddenly, a low growl rose from the edge of the factory. The survivors turned as a new horror emerged, a massive Silent One, larger and more terrifying than any before. Its eyes glowed with a fierce intelligence. It roared, the sound echoing through the factory walls, shaking the survivors to their core. We don't have much time, Claire said grimly. Get ready. The creature charged, and the battle resumed, more desperate, more savage than ever before. Would you like me to continue with part 6? The dawn's weak light filtered through the broken windows of the factory, casting long shadows over the battered survivors. The massive silent one towered above them, its movements heavy but deliberate, like a nightmare made flesh. Claire's arm throbbed fiercely from the wound, but she refused to show weakness. Every second counted. Tom's voice was tense. That thing's different, it's not just a hunter. It's a leader. Jack loaded his weapon with grim determination. Then we take it down before it commands more. The giant creature let out a guttural roar, the sound vibrating through the rusted metal walls. Its eyes scanned the survivors like a predator assessing its prey. Hold your ground, Claire ordered. Don't let it get inside the traps. The fight exploded anew. Bullets tore through the air, sparks flew as metal clashed, and the smell of smoke and sweat filled the cramped space. The creature smashed through barricades, shrugging off hits that would have stopped any ordinary silent one. Marcus ducked behind a conveyor belt, firing steadily. It's strong, too strong. Suddenly, the giant swung a massive arm, sending debris flying. Claire dove just in time, feeling the force of the strike rush past her. She fired a round directly into the creature's chest, but it barely flinched. We need a plan, she shouted. Jack nodded, eyes sharp. Its chest, the glowing core. That's where it's vulnerable. Claire felt a cold surge of hope. Tom, cover me. With adrenaline pumping, Claire crept closer, dodging the creature's attacks. Tom's steady gunfire kept the monster distracted, buying her time. Reaching the glowing core embedded in its chest, Claire raised her rifle. The creature lunged, but she fired. The bullet hit the core with a sizzling burst of light. The giant roared, staggering backward. Sparks flew from its chest as smoke began to curl from the wound. We've got it! Marcus yelled. But the creature wasn't finished. With a final furious bellow, it charged toward Claire. She barely had time to leap aside as it crashed into the machinery, breaking apart but leaving the survivors shaken. As the dust settled, Claire knelt beside her teammates. Their wounds were many, their spirits worn thin, but they had survived. Jack looked around grimly. This changes everything. If there's a leader like that, there could be more. Sarah approached, her voice trembling. What now? We can't keep fighting like this. Claire met her gaze, steel in her eyes. We have to find out where they're coming from, what's controlling them. This isn't just an outbreak. It's a war. That night, back in Ridgefield, the survivors gathered for a tense meeting. Claire shared what they had learned. The silent ones aren't random. They're organized, evolving. If we want to survive, we need to strike at the source. A hush fell over the group. The idea of finding the enemy's origin was terrifying, it meant venturing even further into the unknown. Emily, clutching her teddy bear, spoke quietly. If we don't fight, they'll come for us all. Claire nodded. She's right. We can't wait for them to destroy everything we have left. The survivors steeled themselves for the next phase of their battle, a mission to uncover the source of the Silent Ones and end the nightmare once and for all. Outside, the fog rolled in again, thick and unyielding, hiding dangers yet to come. Would you like me to write part 7 next? The morning was eerily quiet as the small group prepared to leave Ridgefield once more. The wound on Claire's arm throbbed constantly, but she refused to let it slow her down. If there was a source behind the Silent Ones, she had to find it, before the town, and everyone in it, was swallowed by the rising darkness. The survivors gathered what supplies they could spare, weapons, food, water, and whatever medical gear remained. Jack mapped out a route leading deep into the forest beyond the outskirts, toward the abandoned military facility rumored to be the epicenter of the outbreak. Are you sure this place is still standing? Sarah asked, tightening her grip on her rifle. Jack nodded. If the Silent Ones have a base, it's here. Military bunkers, labs, whatever they used to create this horror. Claire checked her rifle one last time, then looked at the others. We go in quiet. No unnecessary noise, no mistakes. Emily clung to Sarah's side, her wide eyes reflecting a mixture of fear and determination. I want to help, she whispered. We'll keep you safe, Claire promised, though the weight of the journey ahead pressed heavily on her heart. The group moved out, slipping through the fog-shrouded streets toward the woods. The trees stood tall and silent, their branches clawing at the gray sky. As they entered the dense forest, the fog deepened, wrapping around them like a suffocating blanket. Every step was cautious, every shadow a potential threat. Hours passed with only the occasional distant groan echoing through the trees. But Claire's instincts told her the worst was yet to come. Suddenly, Jack raised a hand. Stop. From the underbrush came a low, mechanical hum, unlike anything they'd heard before. Claire's heart skipped. This isn't natural, Marcus said quietly. Ahead, through a break in the trees, the ruined military facility loomed, a crumbling fortress of concrete and steel, half swallowed by vines and rot. The air smelled of rust and something sharper, chemicals, maybe. Claire signaled for the group to move forward, weapons ready. Inside the compound, the silence was oppressive. Flickering lights from damaged control panels cast eerie shadows, and the distant drip of water echoed through the halls. Jack led the way to a control room, where broken monitors showed static or flickering images of deserted corridors. Looks like no one's been here in years, Tom whispered. But then, a faint beeping began, rhythmic and low. Claire moved closer, eyes scanning the screens. One flickered to life, revealing a grainy image, rows of tanks filled with a dark, pulsing liquid, and something, or someone, moving inside. The horror settled like a stone in her stomach. This is where it started, Claire said. Some kind of experiment, gone wrong. Suddenly, alarms blared, loud and shrill, echoing through the empty halls. Trap, Jack growled. They knew we'd come. From the shadows, the silent ones surged, faster, more aggressive than ever. The survivors fought desperately, pushing back wave after wave. The building shook with the sound of gunfire and screams. Claire ducked behind a console as a silent one slammed into it, splintering the metal. We need to destroy this place, she shouted. It's the only way to stop them. Marcus spotted a control panel labeled self-destruct. I found it. If we can activate this, it'll take the whole facility down. Tom and Jack covered Claire as she made her way to the panel, hands shaking but steady. With a final, determined press, she triggered the countdown. The alarms grew louder, the walls trembling. Get out, now! Claire shouted. They sprinted through the twisting corridors, silent ones in pursuit. Explosions ripped through the building behind them, flames licking at the sky as the facility collapsed. Breathless and shaken, the group burst into the forest just as the ground rumbled beneath their feet. They watched in silence as the fire consumed the last traces of the nightmare's origin. For a moment, hope flickered, fragile but real. Would you like me to write the final Part 8? Part 8, The Dawn After Darkness. The night air was heavy, thick with smoke from the burning facility that had once birthed the Silent Ones. Claire stood with the survivors at the edge of the forest, watching the fiery glow fade against the dark sky. The roar of the explosions still echoed in their ears, but the oppressive silence that had haunted dead America seemed to shift, as if something had finally broken. Emily, clutching Sarah's hand, looked up at Claire with wide, hopeful eyes. Is it over? Claire hesitated, feeling the weight of the question more than the words. Maybe, but we can't be sure yet. We've destroyed the source, but the world outside is still dangerous. Tom broke the quiet, his voice weary but resolute. What now? Where do we go from here? Claire scanned the horizon. The fog was lifting slowly, revealing a world scarred but still standing. Somewhere beyond Ridgefield, other survivors waited, other pockets of humanity clinging to hope. We rebuild, Claire said finally. We reach out, find others, and fight to reclaim what's left of this world. We won't let fear silence us again. Jack nodded, wiping dirt from his face. We've seen the worst. Now we fight for the best. For the first time in a long while, a flicker of light seemed to shine through the darkness, fragile but undeniable. As dawn broke, the survivors began their long trek back to Ridgefield. The road ahead was uncertain, filled with danger and loss, but also with the promise of a future worth fighting for. Claire looked at her team, battered but unbroken. Each step forward was a defiance against the silence that had claimed so much. The war was far from over. Dead America was still a dangerous place, but with courage and unity, hope could grow in the shadows. And in that fragile hope, Claire found a reason to keep moving forward, to face whatever the silence might bring next. The brave would continue to venture out, to fight, to survive. Because when dead America falls silent, only the brave dare to rise. Would you like me to help with anything else? Maybe a summary or video script based on this story?